Record. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Anybody got a transaction question that they want to pop in at this moment? Okay. If not, I have just a couple things to cover. We got, well, in my experience, about 1% of our files at any time are kind of in some kind of dispute or turmoil. So if we're doing 700 transactions a year as a brokerage, I can expect that 7 files somewhere in one of our, with some of our agents are going through some rancor, if you will. And so one of those popped up this week, and it involves a buyer. We double-ended a transaction. It was single agent, dual agency, which is always the why don't you just put a target on your back and see who's going to shoot at it, either the seller or the buyer, because one of them is maybe going to end up unhappy. We hope that in single agent, dual agent situations, you're dealing with 2 reasonable people who are just using that accommodation for convenience and your skill. But sometimes people see the ability to take advantage of that. So, oh, thanks, Curtis. Is that a link to a hard money lender? Thank you. So in this case, the buyers came and they, before the property was on the market, they had come to our agent at another open house. She said, well, I have this one coming up. It's not quite ready yet. And they wanted to see it. And then they decided to make an offer. And it wasn't really on the market yet. It was listed, but not on the market. Turns out from the very get-go, they seemed they were going to be problematic. One thing is they asked for my number, the broker's number, early on, I mean, like in the first week of the transaction, and called me and said, well, we just want to have your name and number in case something comes up and we can get to you. And I said, that's fine. But that doesn't normally happen. So that's a red flag there. People are usually more interested in their transaction than anticipating problems. Well, it turns out this buyer was just problematic all the way along. They chose not to do any inspections, but now they claim that our agent, we forced them into not doing any inspections, and therefore they have hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage that they want to lay on our agent. So we have a good file. Our agent is an experienced agent, has done a lot of transactions, dual agency transactions over the years, and is experienced. And one thing she got in the transaction was the buyer's inspection waiver. And of course, they're claiming that she forced them to sign this, which is an unusual position to take. But if you do have a buyer who, for whatever reason, wants to waive inspections and make their offer clear of inspections because they read the seller's inspections or whatever, make sure you have this form, because it's one form we're going to bank on in defending this claim if it goes any further than a few letters, which are past hands right now. But it talks about it's a form intended to be used between a buyer and the buyer's broker. It doesn't alter the legal or contractual relationship between the buyer and the seller. So this is just between us as the buyer's agent and the buyer. And it talks about the importance of getting property inspections. It talks about the buyer having an affirmative duty to exercise reasonable care to protect themselves, including discovery of legal, practical, and technical implications or disclosed facts, and so forth and so on. And then it gets into this waiver part. They're waiving a home inspection, they're waiving a pest inspection, they're waiving other, and you can see this capitalized heavy print. If you do not do so, you are acting against the advice of the brokers. So if you don't get a home inspection, you're acting against the advice of the brokers. If you do not get a pest inspection, you're acting against the advice of the brokers, so forth and so on. So this was checked off, an initial, and they checked off on these, and still are claiming that they were forced into doing this and didn't really want to buy the property without the inspections. And since they did, they had incurred all these costs. So, I mean, these folks, you know, I appreciate that we're all kind of different types of people and different trees in the forest, if you will. These folks kind of would fall into what I would call a user category. They tend to use other folks and things. They bought this home. They did extensive remodeling and then claimed $6,000 against the home warranty company. So they've already done that. So, you know, they're just kind of gonna be users. And if you detect that early on, and I know some of you or some of our agents have, you know, they started working with somebody and the people went sideways on them and started complaining. And we had one case where a woman was buying a home. She didn't want to get inspections. Our agent convinced them to get inspections. In the inspections, they discovered $75,000 worth of work. They couldn't reconcile that with the sellers, so they backed out of the transaction. And they wanted our agent to pay for the inspection to save them getting into a $75,000 mistake. So they went, you know, they were quibbling over, I don't know what was, $1,000 or $750 for the inspection to save them all that grief and money. So when that happened, our agent just said, "Listen, I don't want to really be your agent any longer. We aren't going to pay for this inspection. It really saved you a lot of grief, but we also recommend you find a new agent because we don't want to go down that path." So sometimes you have to fire a client who's going to abuse you in the long term in some way. Okay. So, but in particular with the inspections, if you've got someone who's going to waive inspections, make sure you have that waiver inspections form. It's a really nice card to have down on the table. Poker.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah.
What happens if you're in the middle of a transaction with someone that turns out to be a nightmare after the first week in escrow? What do you do then?
Well, you probably should talk to me or Randy and kind of explain what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and then we could, you know, maybe have some suggestions. We could talk to the party themselves, find out what the problem is if we could. Assign another agent. I had an agent one time who had a very good friend, and they listed, our agent listed their property and got a, not an offer yet, but negotiations going on with a buyer about an offer. And the client just, the seller client just went sideways and accused our agent of not representing them in bad faith and blah, 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 to the extent that I had to step in as broker and finish the transaction with the seller, because they more or less fired the agent, and the agent, didn't want to work with them any longer. So I
Yeah,
mean, that happens.
that's good to know. Yeah, that we can just ask for help instead
Yes.
of, yeah. Okay, thanks, Gary.
Okay. Yeah. Don't flounder there. Any other questions on that matter?
Well, Gary, one thing I might add to Patty's situation is when you start to get the vibration that it's not someone you want to work with, you want to really be documenting the file. What is it that's making you feel uncomfortable? What have they said? What have they done? What have they written to you? I passed on a client last year that was referred to me. He had sent several emails that just didn't make me feel comfortable. They wanted me to, select a neighborhood that was very liberal without conservative elements. He stated that he was very indecisive and didn't make clear decisions, and that he drove salespeople crazy. And, he kind of well documented his own shortcomings. And I just very politely said, I think he'd be better served by a different agent. And to which point he got very upset that I would say that to him.
Right.
But I felt very comfortable in not taking this person on as a client, because I could just read the handwriting on the wall.
Yep. And I know you've been in tough situations in the past where you just have to persevere through the end of the transaction, because you're so far into it. There's not much more we can do.
Absolutely.
Yep. So it tries our patience sometimes when people get weird in the course of a transaction. But yeah, ask for help, as Patty said. Call me, call Randy, call manager, and we've all got a little experience that we can draw on. Heather wrote in the chat that you document. Same thing Eric said. So this is the other thing that will help us in this particular claim is that the agent has a very good email trail, a correspondence trail regarding what the buyer was doing along the way. So, we're in good shape. It's just a hassle when you're an agent to have to go through this stuff. And, the worst thing is that people write nasty stuff. And when they get an attorney, the attorney writes even nastier stuff, claiming we're, breached our fiduciary duty and acted in bad faith and all those bad things. And nobody likes to hear that about themselves. So if you're sensing some danger in a transaction, in a sense, you trust your instincts and give us a call and we'll figure it out. We'll do our best. The other thing I wanted to share today was we have, let's see, what did I do? Did I close that out? Oops, sorry. Okay, here we are. We have a agent who is handling a commercial property, and she's one of our commercial agents, Misty Platt. Many of you know Misty. And I think she's representing the seller. I'm not quite sure. But the agent representing the buyer is kind of an inexperienced at commercial real estate, which many might be. And to the extent you have a commercial opportunity and you aren't experienced at that, we recommend you work with someone who is experienced. Better to get half of commission and have a smooth transaction than one that you're groping around in, until you learn that get a few commercial transactions under your belt. But anyway, this seller buyer's agent who is inexperienced asked for a TDS and a SPQ, which you get in residential transactions, but you don't get in commercial transactions. Commercial transactions use this form. a commercial seller property questionnaire. And it's also for residential properties with 5 or more units, the CSPQ. And it has similar questions to the TDS and SPQ, but it is specifically designed for commercial properties. So this is a much better form for us to be using. There's no statutory requirement for a seller to provide a seller property questionnaire, like there is a statutory requirement for a residential seller to provide a TDS. So it's not legally required, but it's certainly very advisable. We would encourage our sellers to complete this form, because though they don't have a legal express legal requirement, they do have a legal requirement to disclose material facts. You know the line, the material facts that affect the value or desirability of the property. So this is a good way to do that. It covers all the bases. So if you're want to learn a little bit more about commercial properties, pull out this form and just review it. It covers a lot of the issues that come up in commercial transactions. And if you're doing, contemplating doing either a commercial listing or a representing a buyer in a commercial transaction, and you don't have experience, give us a call first and we'll talk about it and get it sorted out. Any questions on those issues, that issue? Okay. Well, those are my 2 things today, Heather. I'll turn it over to you. I see Bridget's on. You can introduce Bridget. Do you need to share screen, Bridget?
No, I sent my PowerPoint to Heather.
Oh, okay, great. So Heather's going to walk you through it. She's
yes, thank you.
Heather, you are a co-host, so you can handle that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, so today we have Bridget Peterson from JCP LGS, the Natural Hazard Disclosure Company, and she's going to be talking about best practices with the NHD and some updates. So take it away, Bridget, and I will share your PowerPoint here.
Perfect, thank you. Well, I happen to just look to the right on my screen and I see Trudy up there, and I just want to thank Trudy for suggesting that I reach out to you guys again. I stopped by the Ukiah office recently, and Trudy and Cameron and I sat down, and I don't know, how long did we chat? For about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I think I helped clarify a lot of things. We're going to go over best practices. We're going to go over kind of a lot of information, but we're going to focus on best practices and what's new. I do want to touch on AB 38, not the law, not the form, but just how you can find the information in the report, because that is where I'm really finding a lot of people are confused. So we'll do that. And then Heather will have this PowerPoint. So if there's something you guys see that I don't go over, please reach out. Trudy can tell you, I'm happy to sit down and go over this and really just answer all your questions until you're comfortable. So just a reminder, I do cover the North Bay, which is Marin, Napa, Sonoma, Lake, and Mendocino counties. Next slide. This is a list of the questions that I get asked the most. So best practices. Some of this stuff seems really obvious, you guys, but then I'll have a broker ask me something. So I added it to this list. When should you order your report? We recommend you order your report to include with all your other disclosures at time of listing. We are also happy to provide the report for you to take to a listing appointment. If you don't get the listing, all you have to do is forward the report back to me and just ask me to cancel it. I'm happy to do that. And we'll always update your report. So even if you have a listing for 6-9 months, which has not been the norm lately, we're happy to update it anytime you need it. Do you need an NHD for commercial? You do, actually. What is not statutory is nobody needs to sign the statutory signature page. We have a really great line of commercial products. If you have an area that you're selling a commercial property and you're suspicious that there could be some underground leaking storage in situations, you don't want to spend the $2,000 to $4,000 on a phase one, we have a great tool for you. And you can spend a lot less money, $150, to kind of do a preliminary peek at what, to cross out any problems with that. Mobile homes, you guys, do you guys know that we have a mobile home product where if there are no tax rolls, then we can give you a report for $55. It's not going to include the environmental, doesn't include the tax information, but you get a report for $55. The key being it can't have any tax rolls attached to it. Multiple APN orders. I've gotten a few of these questions recently. There is a requirement that you have to have a report for each additional APN or address. So if you're selling, let's say somebody's buying 3 houses, totally separate homes, totally separate APNs, as long as they're contiguous and there is nothing different in the report, we'll just add that on as an addendum. And you'll get one report, one invoice, and it's just an additional $40 for each additional APN or address. Just as a rule of thumb, you guys should always, always, always email the entire report, not just the summary. The full report is where all the laws are contained. There's hyperlinks. That's really where your buyers, if they have any questions, are going to get the resources they need to investigate the property further. And really what that's doing is it's protecting you. Flood information. So just quickly want to touch on the difference between the FEMA maps and the dam inundation maps. FEMA maps are what can potentially require flood insurance. Dam inundation maps are just going to tell you if a dam fails, that you're in a mapped area that could get water, and flood insurance is not required for the dam inundation areas. If you're in a FEMA A or V, where that's the FEMA zones that could potentially require flood insurance, we're going to provide a flood certificate. And a flood certificate is different than an elevation certificate, you guys. If you have any questions, just reach out to me on that. We're going to take a peek again at AB 38 and SB 63, but always go to your summary. So many people call me and say, hey, I'm looking on the statutory signature page and I'm confused. I don't understand, the way we're reporting it. Remember, you need to go to the summary. If you are in the wildland area where CAL FIRE is responsible, we only mark that you are in that area. And that area has 3 different zones. It has a moderate zone, a high zone, and a very high zone. Moderate is not, does not trigger AB 38. So we have a line item. The other thing that can happen is the map is from 2007. Sometimes CAL FIRE and counties or cities renegotiate their boundaries. That's not going to show up on that statutory signature page. That's where we're going to go dig deeper, and we're going to give you that information in the summary. Want to remind you guys as well, the statutory signature page is created by the state of California, and nobody except the state of California can change that. And they tell us how to report on it. So I've had so many people say, why don't you guys change this? This is confusing. We don't change it because we can't. So that is the one page in any NHD company that you're using that's always going to look the same. We are told what maps to use on that. So just keep that in mind. Go to your summary. That's where the rubber hits the road. Taxes. You guys, JCP owns its own tax department. And what that means is that we can include PACE contracts. So you might see from your prelim if there's a lien on the property. However, we're going to provide the actual contract. So if there is a PACE lien, which is for something like a new roof, a new HVAC, new windows, those types of energy, items, it can get quite expensive. We're going to tell you how much is still left on the loan. And then we are going to provide the contract so you can just boom, look at it, figure out how to get it paid off. Also, there's a supplemental tax worksheet, super, super helpful for especially first-time home buyers, or if a property has not sold recently. All you do is you click on the link, you enter the purchase price and the month it's closing, and we are going to calculate what the new taxes, or excuse me, the supplemental taxes. Last, I want to make sure you guys all know about NHD Academy online. We have it on our social media. It's a great passive way for you guys to keep up to date on things that are industry related and hazard related. So that's on Facebook. But we also have, I think we're up to 10 or 11 5-minute videos on all the different topics on the NHD report. It's a fantastic tool that you just go on to disclosures.com. There you'll find the educational videos, and you can also refer your clients there. Super succinct explanation of what those disclosures are. Highly recommend. Next slide.
I am not muted. Bridget, really quick before we move on, can you quickly tell us the difference between flood certificates and elevation certificates?
Absolutely. A flood certificate is something that your lender is going to look at, and typically the lenders who orders that. An elevation certificate is where you actually have to go out and have an engineer measure. So flood certificate, let's say you have a property and there's just a small portion that's in the flood zone, but the structure itself is outside the flood zone. We're going to tell you that that structure is out. That's what this flood certificate tells you. The elevation certificate, you guys think about along the Russian River, where you've seen homes that have been raised. The structure itself is in the flood zone, but it's been raised, and then the engineer goes out and measures it. That typically will help mitigate your flood cost. Okay. Also, just a heads up, does everybody know that FEMA is updating its flood maps? They've updated it for Sonoma County, which I believe there's about 350 new properties. It's all like Southwest Santa Rosa. Also, Mendocino was just updated, and that is up in like Willits, I believe, is where that was affected. If you haven't gotten that information, you should have gotten an email from JCP and me. If you haven't gotten that, I'm going to connect with Heather after this. I'll do a follow-up, and I will make sure that you have that information. Also, you guys, if you have questions, just feel free to interrupt me. That's how we actually all learn. Next slide. What's new in the report, you guys? SB 63, is there anybody on this call that is familiar with SB 63 besides Trudy? Kinda, I'll touch on that. It really, you need to be looking at a map to check that out. Just so you guys know, SB 63 is a new law. It's not telling agents to do anything. It's the state of California that passed a law telling CAL FIRE they need to add additional layers to the local responsibility area. I'll show you on a map. CAR, obviously, we all now are aware that the FHDS form was revised in June. We've recently added sustainable groundwater management information. The state, you guys, back in 2014 passed a law that basically said our underground water is a public resource and we need to start managing it. I think probably after our last few years of drought, it's kind of top of mind. Sonoma County has started to collect money for properties that have wells that are in groundwater basin areas that they want to keep a sharp eye on, because maybe their groundwater is depleting there. So I had somebody explained the groundwater situation to me as we're all drinking out of the same milkshake and we need to make sure that everybody gets a little. So look for more information coming on this. Again, there's 3 different groundwater basin areas in Sonoma County. One is the Sonoma Valley, one is the Santa Rosa Valley, and one is the Petaluma Valley. Look for more information coming. And again, this will affect properties with wells. It's an in or out determination on our report. FEMA flood maps, we kind of just went over that. Risk factor. This is a new feature that like realtor.com has rolled out, and I'm starting to get questions on it. I do have some information that I will send to Heather that is from NAR that will help you guys answer those questions. Just keep in mind, it does not meet the NHD statutory requirements, but what it's doing is it's where, like if you look up at a property on realtor.com and you scroll down and look at the property features, it will have a fire factor and a flood factor. And I believe they've just added a heat factor. And what they're doing is they are using technology to calculate risk out 25 to 30 years. In other words, the life of a mortgage. So a lot of people calling going, what the heck is this? Because, you know, as you guys, I'm sure are aware, clients are looking up properties online, you know, that they want to look at, and then they call you, hey, I saw this online. I had some agents in Marin that were like, hey, I just had a client call and cross out 3 of the properties I was going to show her because of this risk factor. So don't look at it necessarily as a bad thing, but maybe as a tool to help you. We have buyer's guides, you guys. Super helpful in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. I have them electronically as well as hard copy. And then we have a Cal OES website that we are partnering with, which again, you can easily add an address. It's going to zoom down on an area. So if you have, let's say, a home buyer, maybe they're a young first-time home buyer, they're at the top of their budget, they cannot afford flood insurance. You can put in an address. They say, hey, I want to be out in a certain area. You can put that in. It'll zoom in. You can't zoom into a certain property because all of the layers will go away, but it will give you a good idea of certain areas and what their hazard zones are. And it's everything except the LRA, which is the local responsibility, think cities, and dam inundation. So it does have earthquake, it does have flood, it does have out in the SRA. So look for more information on that. Next slide. I apologize.
What's the Cal OES?
Pardon me?
What's Cal OES? What's that?
It's the California
What is
Office.
Cal OES? What does that stand?
It's the California Office of Emergency Services.
Thanks.
So, okay. I apologize. I didn't realize this was such a crummy. I took this out because for whatever reason, I took it out of my slideshow and I put it back in and now I'm seeing it's very blurry. But what I do, I think you guys can see, is that on the right-hand side, the acknowledgement receipt for consumer information, your guys' clients, your buyers are getting inundated with so much information and they're just clicking, yes, I received. This is a great tool for you to be able to say, here are all the booklets, here is all the hyperlinks for them, and you're getting proof that they actually got them. Because we know, yes, I got them, they're probably not actually looking. So that's just a tool that's, you guys will get a consolidated signature page. It won't just have that one page, it will have anything that requires a signature. So your TCs, or those of you that manage your own transactions, you can just click on that, it uploads it to DocuSign for you, okay? Next slide. I'm gonna go ahead and skip this. You guys just had a training, right, Heather, on AB 38. So let's skip this. Your attorney probably went over that. And again, I'm always happy, you guys, to answer questions. This is my #1 question. I have an agent call and they say, I see on the signature page that it's not, this property is, the box is checked, it is not in a high, it's not in a very high fire hazard severity zone, but the wildland says it's in, and you're telling me now that it is subject to AB 38. So let's just quickly, and Heather, interrupt me if you guys have gone over this with your attorney. This is from the same map, you guys. This is a very high fire hazard severity zone, is talking about the LRA, the local responsibility areas, the cities. The wildland area is talking about the state areas where CAL FIRE is responsible. So on the same map, if you're in a city and you're in a very high fire hazard severity zone, we're going to check yes on this top line item. If you are out in a more rural area where CAL FIRE is responsible, and let me back up. On the local, the LRA, you have two choices. You have that you are in an area that's a local responsibility area and not in any elevated fire zone, or you're in a very high fire hazard severity zone. There's no in between. You're in one or the other. In the city of Santa Rosa, think of like West College. You're in an area where Santa Rosa is responsible, but you're not in a very high fire hazard severity zone. Now let's go up to like Fountain Grove. You're in the city where the city is responsible, but you're in a very high. We only check that box if you're in a very high. We report differently on the state. We tell you if CAL FIRE or the state is responsible in a wildland area. There's 3 different options. It's moderate, high, or very high. So how do you know then if you're subject to AB 38 if you're in a wildland area? Well, back in January of 2021, we added a line item in our summary. So next slide. This is the actual state map that is making this determination. It's one map, you guys. It's not a city map and the state map. It's this particular map. This isn't JCP telling you this. This is CAR telling you this. This is NORBAR telling you this. And this is CAL FIRE telling you this. Next slide. I'm going to zoom in for you guys. I tried to do a Sonoma County zoom in. As you can see on this map, which you guys, anybody can Google this. All you have to do is CAL FIRE hazard severity zone maps. It'll come up. You have to navigate a tiny bit. And that big state map will come up and then you zoom in. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the maps. However, when we talk about the LRA, that top line item, we're talking about that gray area. And I think, I don't think I can, maybe I can, hold on you guys. I'm there. If you look at the legend on the right, that's going to tell you what these different areas are. If you look under FHSZ in the LRA, there's one color, that's the very high. And if you look under the SRA, there's 3. Remember, only high and very high are what trigger AB 38, not the moderate, which is the yellow. And look at how much yellow is actually in. I try to do as much as Sonoma County as I can. Just to let you guys quickly know, there's 2 cities that have very high fire hazard severity zones. One is Santa Rosa, one's Cloverdale. And then let's touch base on SB 63. SB 63 is saying that in the local responsibility areas, CAL FIRE has to add moderate and high. And if you go back over to the legend and you look under the SRA where it says moderate, high, very high, and you look under LRA and there's just that one very high, that red, CAL FIRE is required to update their maps so that it will have all 3, just like in the SRA. So what are your thoughts on what's going to happen in these local responsibility areas that currently there's not a whole lot of very high? There's going to be a lot more properties subject to AB 38. We're hearing these maps are coming out sooner rather than later. And JCP's already added this to our report. So I'll show you. Do you guys have any questions on this? I know it's a lot of information in a short amount of time. Does anybody have any questions on the difference between the SRA and the LRA? No?
Nope, it's great info.
Next slide. You guys can digest and call me later too. I'm going to go ahead and let's move on from this, just because we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this. I do want to mention, you guys, and we'll stay on this, Heather, thank you. I do want to mention that the city of Santa Rosa is an anomaly in that the maps are from 2007, just so you know, CAL FIRE maps from 2007. CAL FIRE sent out their map to all the cities and said, hey, take a look at, city of Santa Rosa, every city, you guys take a look. These are our recommendations. You can modify what you want in your own city to be the very high fire hazard severity zone on CAL FIRE's map. As far as I know, City of Santa Rosa is the only city that did that. They had a certain amount of time to do it. I think it was 121 days for them to pass an ordinance. City of Santa Rosa did that. So in the City of Santa Rosa, we use the WUI map, which was adopted in 2009 to make the determination for the very high fire hazard severity zone. And that will not show up if you're looking, if you're Google, if you go onto the map and you're poking around looking, it's not going to show up there. I know that's confusing. So when I say you don't even need to look at the maps to figure out if AB 38 is applicable, you're going to go to the summary of the JCP report. That's the slide we're on right now. You're going to go down, and just so you guys know, if you look at it, which it's a far away photo, you can tell that top section of the summary, that's a mirror, and it's the same information that's on the statutory signature page. We just go into more detail. And then we go to county level disclosures, we go to city level disclosures, and then that last section is for additional statutory disclosures. Next slide. That's where you're going to find AB 38. This is, I kind of zoomed it in, and also we've added this SB 63. You do not need to know anything about the maps. You just come to the summary, and we're going to tell you in or not in the AB 38 zone. If it were in to the right, it would say property is in a mapped high fire hazard severity zone, or it would say it was in a very high fire hazard severity zone. You don't need to know anything else. That's your first step in determining if the FHDS form is required. And there's a couple reasons. One, I just mentioned with Santa Rosa. The other is the wildland fire. We remember, I told you, we check the box of CAL FIRE's responsible, but we're not telling you what zone it's in. So you have to come here or you'll over disclose. And I have yet to meet a seller that says, yes, I would voluntarily love to be subject to the FHDS form. If you're using a local map to make this determination, you're also over disclosing, and you also are subjecting your clients to filling out the FHDS form unnecessarily. AB 38 is not triggered by local maps unless they were adopted by a local ordinance back in like 2009. The only city I know that did that was Santa Rosa. Also, we recently had a situation come up where neither box on the front page, the statutory page, was checked, but it was in AB 38. We had our whole Northern California went over this for a good half an hour, you guys. The reason for that is sometimes CAL FIRE and local counties and cities can renegotiate their boundaries. Remember, on that statutory signature page, we have really narrow parameters of when and how we check those boxes. On the summary page, we dig deeper. We're looking at, what maps have been adopted. We're looking at all this stuff, and we can give you additional information there. So that's why I tell you, always, always, always go to your summary. Below the AB 38, you see the fire hazard severity zone SB 63. We tell you the map's not available yet. As soon as the map is available, we will be including it just like we do for the SRA. We'll report on it exactly the same way. Again, not telling agents to do anything, it's telling CAL FIRE that they have to add more maps. And then if you want to find out, who do I call for an inspection? Who do I call to find out if there's a local ordinance? You're going to go all the way to the right where it says NHD report page, and it's going to be a highlighted number. That's a hyperlink, and you can click on that page 18. Next slide, Heather. And it actually will take you to the top of the law of AB 38. You scroll down past the page and a half of AB 38 law, And at the bottom of the second page, you'll find the contact information for who you call to find out about a local ordinance, or if you, the seller wants to have an inspection prior to close of escrow, or if the buyer is agreeing to have that inspection. As a buyer's agent, you should be making sure that they see this, that this is where they can call to schedule that appointment. And then if you see at the very bottom in that hyperlink that talks about AB 38, that's a hyperlink to that CAL FIRE map that I showed you. Next question, next question, sorry. Next slide, please. I think we're going to zoom through a couple more slides, actually. Oh, let's stop here. I have a cheat sheet for you guys. This is a cheat sheet that I made because I was getting so many questions, and each of these questions are numbers, number 1, number 2, number 3, they are correlated to the FHDS form. And I just want to quickly make sure you all realize the FHDS form is only required if it's in a high or very high. We tell you in the summary. A TDS is required for the transaction, and it's a residential 1 to 4. All 3 of the above must apply for the property to be subject to AB 38. If one doesn't apply, then you do not need to include that FHDS form. I think everything else your attorney probably went over, so we will, I don't know what the inspections are costing. CAL FIRE typically, I believe, does not charge. City of Santa Rosa does. Everybody's charging differently. Just so you guys know, the City of Santa Rosa does have a local ordinance. It is not a point of sale. There are no point of sale requirements in Sonoma, Napa, Lake, or Mendocino counties. As far as I know, there are almost, I believe all of those places do have some sort of local ordinance that is not a point of sale. You would want to confirm that, though. You can always reach out to me. I have almost all of the local ordinances. We've reached out, we're compiling, we're trying to create some sort of reference for you guys. The problem is we're getting conflicting information. So obviously we don't want to put something in a report and then have it be wrong. So bear with us. It's super fluid. And just to kind of give you guys an example of different type of ordinances, you know, on this FHDS form, that 3A, it's asking you a yes or no. Is this property subject to a local ordinance? They're not asking you what type. They're just asking you, is there a local ordinance? Sonoma County has an ordinance. Mendocino has an ordinance. Napa has I'm talking counties. Napa County has an ordinance. Lake County has an ordinance. Lake County's ordinance is, hey, if you live in a high or very high, you're expected to keep your property, you know, your grass is trimmed. It's more of a weed abatement. They're only going to come out and check if somebody complains. City of Santa Rosa has an ordinance, not a point of sale. They are trying to go out and inspect about 4,000 properties per year, starting in the late fall. Same thing with the county of Sonoma. So there's different types of ordinances, but just remember that's a yes or no. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to help figure that out and provide backup for you on that. Or you can have your seller. I've had 2 brokers since doing this PowerPoint that have said, make sure you're having your sellers call to get that information. And you guys can talk to your brokers and figure out how you want to do that. But really, the FHDS form is the seller's filling out that form. So the seller should be calling the local fire department to find out, hey, is this property subject to, you know, a local ordinance? So this is a kind of a great tool. You guys are welcome to call me. We can go over it anytime. Marin County, if anybody is on the call from Marin County, that's a different animal. And we'll talk about that at a different time. But really, you need to be asking when you call a fire department, is there a local ordinance and is it a point of sale? Because they do have a lot of point of sales down there. Any other questions on this little tool that I'm including? Okay, next slide. I see something in the chat, but I don't think I can click that.
The only thing I see in the chat is from Curtis. Do you know what the inspection's costing? I think you
Oh.
already answered that.
Okay, great. Let's move on from this. This is for when I do a FHDS presentation, but I'm sure your attorney went over all of this. Unless you guys have a question. I think we're getting kind of past our time, right?
We've got a few more minutes.
Okay. Did your attorney go over this at all?
Mhm.
Heather?
Yeah.
They went over the form?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then we don't need to do that. So the last thing I just want to make sure that you guys understand, I know you guys have choices out there, probably more choices than ever for your NHD providers. And one of the things that I think our real estate industry is really based on relationships. I just want to really make sure you guys know it's so important to have a face-to-face relationship with you guys. I'm accountable to you, your standard of care, your service, your education. I don't just work with you as agents, I work with TCs. I work with buyers and sellers. If I were to say, how many questions do I get from sellers? A lot, especially on the fire stuff, you guys. I am happy to talk to them and help walk you guys through this process. Everybody right now is used to Zoom. We can set up a Zoom where we do it with the client and you as the agent. I also have a lot of times people wanting to get questions answered on the environmental portion of the report. So just remember, you know, I would love to work with you because I'm accountable not just to you, but your clients. And my next slide will show you my contact information. If any of you want to sit down and do a one-on-one, I would be happy to do that. I know I just threw a ton of information at you. Again, Trudy and I sat down for at least an hour and a half. Probably 90% of that was on the FHDS form. And we can go into more detail about those maps. Typically what I'll do is if you have like if I were to do like up in Ukiah, I was showing Trudy the maps of Ukiah. So just keep me in mind as a resource, you guys.
Great.
And if that's it, then I appreciate your time.
All right. Any last questions for Bridget? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bridget. Much appreciated.
Yeah, lots of good info.
All right, you guys, have a great weekend and hopefully we get a little break on this heat.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
And you'll send me some info to send out. Oh, I think she's already gone. I think she said she'd forward me some info that I can forward you guys with those resources. All right. Well,
Okay.
Any last questions or anything? Are we all?
We're all good for this week, I think. I have a board meeting next week, so Heather will plan the day. And if my board meeting ends early, I'll pop in, but yeah. If no other questions, anybody got a question?
I was just going to throw out there, I have a financial advisor coming for part of the class next week. She's going to be talking about, you know, financial tips and updates on the market and, you know, some things you might want to consider.
Great. All right, everybody, have a great weekend ahead. Stay cool.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.